Crime has been a blight on Jamaican society for quite some time now, to the extent that persons have been calling for harsher penalties. It has answered, but are these sufficient or are they too much? On the conversation, I have Government Senator Dr. Sapphire Longmore. Welcome to the conversation. How are you?
Thank you, Kwame. Thank you for having me.
So, several interest groups and several advocacy and interest groups have been speaking out against the mandatory minimum sentences. What are your views? Are these concerns valid, the concerns that they have posed to say why they don't want such penalties or so?
Well, Kwame, this is no easy matter to resolve, firstly. And in government, we have to consider all sides of the equation. At the end of the day, when something as horrific, and my specific utterances were around child murderers, because I think that that is probably one of the most heartbreaking situations for not just an individual or community, but also for a nation to deal with and to grapple with. And what we have been seeing in our society over the past couple of years has been a trending up, a very harsh reality that there seems to be almost an inclination for some very negative elements of our society to prey on our children in some very harsh ways. And so we have to, in government, consider the victim. We have to consider the offender, and we have to consider the society. And in charting a way for the society where justice is served, we have to come up with, I think, a manner of disciplining the society and instituting ways of discipline that ensures that justice is due and is delivered.
But would that be, for example, when you speak about the death penalty for some of these offenses, would that be discipline or would that be punishment? Because my idea is that when you're disciplining somebody, you're looking for rehabilitation or behavior modification, but this person is dead. There's no coming back from that.
Right. And this is the difficulty of how we have to decipher this. You know, I recently tried to bring an awareness as to the difference between discipline and punishment. And I at that time had likened to what we see oftentimes in our schools, where sometimes our children turn up with wrong uniform, late for school, something. And the response that oftentimes we see come out is in my mind, more punishment rather than discipline. And we have traditionally seemed to misconstrue discipline as a negative element, as a negative interaction between someone. Discipline is actually a positive thing. It is an act of love. It is trying to help someone improve and recognize that if you delay an act of inclination in the moment, you may end up with an act of happiness later on. If you think about it, that's discipline. Punishment is when you enact something in the effect to either create a negative perception of whatever it is that you're trying to deter, or you're actually creating an avenue for the person not to do it again. When you're talking about child murderers, and remember, I will always go back to that because that is my utterance, that with irrefutable evidence, we have the technology of DNA and other ways of confirmation, irrefutable evidence, that child murderers, I think, should not see the light of day again. I don't think they should see the light of day again because they're removed from our environment, from our society. One child that did not even get a chance to see adulthood. Not to mention the effect on the family. When you are trying to curb that level of behavior in a society, you have to consider that there are others who are looking on that are seeing how you respond as the society to such an act, and will recognize that, okay, if it is a matter where I'll go to prison for a certain amount of time, and the fear of God is not instilled in me to not do it again, why? What is the deterrent?
So the question, though, that comes to mind immediately is whether or not our system, or penal system or judiciary system, if it's mature enough to handle that, in that we will use all the measures to ensure that at the end of the day, you know that justice is being served because we have followed the right protocols and all of that, as opposed to charge you and I don't have sufficient resources to prove whether or not you're guilty, so that we don't get the wrong person being punished, because this is not discipline in here and now that we're talking about. We're talking about punishment.
Yes, so most definitely, and that's why I underscored it, I prefaced it, that it is with irrefutable evidence, which we are getting more of. The government, and not because I am a part of this administration, but there is a concerted effort led by the Prime Minister to ensure that we're getting the right people, to ensure that the evidence is being had quickly and in a very sophisticated way, to ensure that the DPP's office, the police, all facets that are involved in determining guilty or not guilty is as spot on as possible. And we have seen where that is being realized now. And so, of course, I would not be saying this. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm a human behavior specialist. We are the ones who are the main advocates for rehabilitation and for giving persons a chance to be actualized in their own lives. But we have to, in government, also recognize that you have a responsibility to the victim and to the society. And we must lead by recognizing, for me, that our children's development and the opportunity for our children to develop is top priority. And if someone decides that they're going to rob a child of that, why should they have an opportunity?
Well, good words, but invoking Article 6 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, you argued for the entitlement of children to full and adequate development. How do you see the death penalty aligning with the international standards on human rights, especially in the context of child perpetrators, though?
Well, now you're going to something else. So what I was alluding to was when a child is a victim, so adult murderers of children. When you have a child who is an offender, which is one of the Joint Select Committee is reviewing this specific aspect, that now is a whole nother level of consideration. Because when you have a child who is an offender of a crime, you not only have the victim, as we normally perceive it, of that crime, but the child himself or herself who has offended is a victim too. Because somewhere in that child's development, whether it was the early years, the middle years, or the latter years before they turn 18 years old, they were predisposed, I am almost guaranteeing you, to some condition that led them to commit such an offense. That is a different approach that I would recommend. And when a child is a perpetrator of a serious crime, I would suggest that we have a tiered approach between the age groups with respect to age of responsibility. So the reason why a child, if I'm no lawyer, of course, but I think there is a different category with 12 years and under based on the fact of what we call the cognitive development of that child and their ability to intercept right and wrong, abstract thinking, etc., etc. There's a different approach between 12 and, say, 15 years old. And there's a different approach between 16 and 18 years old. Based on the responsibility, the mental capacity of the child, anyone below 18, And also whether or not they were coerced. What were the predisposing factors that led to this child offending? I certainly would not put a child to death, but I would recommend that we have specific rehabilitative mechanisms because that individual is still a child. And when we have a child offender, there are two victims, so justice needs to be served on both sides.
So then going back to the idea of discipline vis-a-vis punishment, that's where discipline would come in.
Exactly.
So for the adults, there's no room for recourse.
No adult who kills a child deserves to see the light of day.
So you're saying definitely. So we're not looking at any potential legal implications that would ensure or any concern that would ensure for fair and just legal processes. As far as you're concerned, adults.
Irrefutable evidence. Adult kill off a child.
Never see the light of day.
Consider a situation that we're hearing now in the news of the case out in Montego Bay.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Where the teenager was filmed while she was being raped and stabbed. And you have the offenders of that and the persons who have, I think they have admitted, and this is their statements, essentially bragging about videotaping, stabbing and raping that teenage girl. Why should that person see the light of day again?
So,
what is the message to the society in allowing that person to have the possibility of seeing the light of day again? What message are we as a society saying to those people who are inclined to think that way amongst us? Versus the message to say, it is not tolerable, there's absolutely no excuse for it. We have choices to make.
So now, how does this particular incident plus the other one in Salt Spring, where the two 9-year-old boys, that one that occurred, do you think those might have influenced your advocacy for the resumption of, say, the death penalty?
Well, if I'm remembering the case properly, that's the case where the offenders were children themselves, correct? Right. Again, we have to do what we call the social inquiry report. We probably have to bring in a psychiatric report as to what factors a 9-year-old or a 15-year-old doesn't just get up. A typical child does not get up and decide that they're going to commit murder, Kwame. There are factors that lead to them being at that point in their lives to commit such an act. And so we must recognize, and my approach is that we need to start appreciating not just that the value of our children has been our future, but it is almost a paradigm shift to recognize that the protection of our children is our future. And so, whether or not they are victims, whether or not they are offenders, they still need to be cared for. And that child who offends is a child who also is in need of care. And so our services, and I saw recently where there is even a group that is advocating for persons who are mentally ill who are in our prison systems. It adds to the need for what we call a forensic psychiatric or a forensic mental health service that provides for quote-unquote punishment or the charges, persons who are affected in this way. They are provided for in a punishment system that is geared towards them based on their background. And our child offenders would fall into that. So there is possibility for rehabilitation there, and age appropriately so.
All right, thank you very much. So we go to our first break. You're watching The Conversation. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the conversation. Just before the break, you're looking at, well, I'm not even sure if I should call it an eye for an eye, because some persons might take that to mean something else. But we're looking at whether or not we can justifiably say that this punishment fits the crime. And based on what you have presented, I do believe so. But the next question now is whether or not our systems are mature enough. I mean, I hinted at that earlier. You know, how much time will it take, or how much resources will it take for us to get to that place where the systems are mature enough to ensure that these things are being done and we're not sidestepping anyone and everyone is benefited from the fact that these laws are being enacted and carried out properly and timely.
So Kwame, I mean, I'm a human behavior specialist. That's what I do. And I quickly recognize that I think that we need to be ensuring that the message is being sent that as a society we will not tolerate this anymore. The systems have to catch up. If we aim at a certain point, if we have a certain target to meet with this objective, and the objective being that we are not going to tolerate our children being slaughtered the way that they have been, we're not going to tolerate the fact that persons believe that, okay, I will do some time and get back out there to breathe fresh air. And because of the inefficiency of the system, whatever sentencing or whatever punishment that is coming my way is likely going to be delayed. That's when I said that we need to have the paradigm shift to recognize that the objective is to get the message across that our children are our priority. And if you damage one of them, you're going to get damaged. And we will put and work to put the systems in place to ensure such. And the fact of the matter is that the administration has been working to do that. Security is one of the paradigm policy decisions that the Prime Minister has been working on. They have been equipping the JDF, they've been equipping the JCF, they've been intelligence, the legislations that are necessary. There has been effort, and it has been bearing fruit.
So we're well on our way then, you would say?
We're well on our way, and we need to make sure that the objective message, the endpoint message, is in keeping with those avenues that we're pursuing.
All right, so given the global discourse that we have had, alternative approaches to criminal justice, especially as it concerns or relates to rehabilitation. How do you respond then to arguments against the death penalty that are advocating for a more rehabilitative and restorative justice system now? We can
rehabilitate the rapists, we can rehabilitate the armed murderers, we can rehabilitate the arsonists, we can rehabilitate, perhaps consider rehabilitating the adult murderers. The child murderers, no. The child murderers have robbed an individual, a child, of the opportunity to see adulthood.
And there's no coming back.
And there's no coming back from that in my mind. In my mind.
All right.
And I don't know, perhaps my passion or my sentiment towards this comes not just from my professional work and what I see, but I'm a parent. I'm a parent. I don't know if you're a parent. All right? And I won't put you on the spot because I have declared my position, and for whatever reasons. But the truth of the matter is when you hurt and when you damage a family structure that way, the damage don't just stay at that level, you know. You traumatize.
It ripples out.
You traumatize the family, you traumatize the community, and you traumatize the country. You also set the precedents out there in the international space of what Jamaica is. And for me, we need to start saying our children are worth a lot more than somebody just going to prison for a few years.
I see your point. In your statement, you liken the murder of children to a public health crisis. I think that's it. And you suggested
crime generally,
treating it as an emergency. how do you therefore envision the death penalty addressing this particular crisis? And in what ways should the legislators respond urgently? We're talking about the urgency behind it now.
So again, irrefutable evidence for child murderers, not providing a carte blanche solution to murderers, etc. Because again, all parameters have to be considered. My thing and why I wanted to bring this to the fore was because of, like I said, the increased incidences of these circumstances that we've been seeing. But we also have the Joint Select Committee that is reviewing these legislations. We are actively conscious of constitutional reform, etc., etc. And we are also, on the other hand, seeking solutions to violence. We're actively doing that as a country. So I thought that this is the point for us to raise this conversation and to put it out there. I mean, if my voice is one that says we're not going to tolerate this, since I have said this, quite a few people have supported it. Quite a few people have indicated it. A lot of persons have said, Sapphire, you're only stopping at child murders. All murderers should get the death penalty. I'm restrained in the sense that, okay, I am dealing at this point with child murderers and with those that are irrefutable in the evidence of such.
All right, so your advocacy has gone way beyond just child murderers and how we treat the death penalty as it relates to child murderers and also, but you spoke also about co-parenting. So that's what I want to hear about now, the use of access as a tool, where you spoke about mothers using the children as some form of punishment for the fathers because the fathers are no longer there in the relationship. So can you elaborate a little bit more on the advice that you had given to mothers regarding the use of access to children as a tool for revenge against fathers?
So let us put it all in context. So this, I take it that you're referring to my State of the Nation presentation last week. And at that presentation, I made quite a few suggestions, practical suggestions, because I likened our situation and predisposition to violence based on our generational predispositions to such coming from our post-colonial past and what we were basically taught as ways of communicating, unfortunately, and that has become ingrained in our culture. And so one of the things that we see is the breakdown of family and family structure. And my advocacy was for legislation to support the time for family to heal and avenues that we could do so. And one of the things I did mention was mothers, single mothers, getting support, especially in the postpartum period, but also the fact that, and anecdotally this is what I see, is that there's a lot of relationship discord after a child is born, unfortunately. And a lot of relationships go awry at that time. Whether it is because of the newness of the relationship or, sorry, the child in the relationship and so forth. A lot of discord happens. So I advocated for support for single mothers using technology to enhance that and such and such. I also went on to recognize that oftentimes, unfortunately, a child can be used as a tool of revenge, or time with the child can be used as a tool for revenge for women who are, for mothers who feel in some way disenfranchised, or they're having an issue with how to deal with whatever interaction they're having with their ex-partner or the father of that child. But I will also recognize too, Kwame, that unfortunately, and this is the reality, sometimes there's also the tango between the father and the mother over financial matters. And women are left victim. And oftentimes, because we know of the earning potential of a lot of women who, at that time when they're going through motherhood, they may not be as financially viable, simply because they have to be taking care of the child. And that puts them at risk. And men will use that as a tool of revenge too. So we need to, the whole underlying scope is that as individuals, as communities, and as a society, we need to recognize that our children are our priority. So if you having a discord with your ex-partner, make the child the priority. Make the development of the child the priority.
Are there any other ways that you can envision prioritizing the child's development during the resolution of the relationship and all of those things?
Well, one of the things that I also spoke to was the lack of generational connection in our society today. You know, I related it back to, again, the post-colonial times. When our forefathers were brought here, there was a systematic, an active, systematic destruction of family in Okwami. The slave owners would use the males as breeders and would literally remove them from the children, would literally create disconnect because they knew the strength that could come from the presence of a father. And that passed through our generations. And so we need to put systems, I think, in place, use technology to enhance it, to remind our children of their origins, to remind our children of their families. How many Jamaican families can say what their great-grandfather's name is? 2 generations before. How many Jamaican children can say, my great-great-grandfather is this person? Go in some other societies. I always love to adapt from other and learn from other societies. Do you know that the Chinese culture, I had a Chinese roommate once, and I came home just one odd Thursday, and she was busy because she was cooking, because she had to go to her family because they were celebrating within the family the birthday of her great-great-great-grandmother. And that was a family holiday that they all gathered to celebrate the birthday of the great-great-great-grandmother. And throughout the year, great-great-grandmother, great-great-grandfather, great-grandfather, great-grandmother, right throughout. We don't even know 2-3 generations before.
That might be a function of how early we begin to have children as well, because when you have, for example, a grandparent who is barely 50, so the grandparent is barely 50, and her mother, of course, was a victim of teenage pregnancy.
Yes.
How do we put that in context of all that you have just said?
So, I also spoke to the need for planned parenting and the need for sexual health education. Because, you know, at the end of the day, and, you know, we're recognizing across the world that for whatever reasons, birth rates are going down, and you have some societies that are actually asking people to have more kids now and so forth. We're not really there yet. But the planning of pregnancies and family planning is not only about the persons who are actively pursuing that. It starts from in our schools, I think. It starts from an awareness that an act of sex can result in a pregnancy.
What's an appropriate age, though, to start
so
that kind
of course,
education?
that's age and stage appropriate. And at the end of the day, you know, we have to remove the taboo of sex in Jamaican society, that it happens. And this is something that we need to start allowing our children who are curious to not get answers in a responsible way. They're seeking answers online. They're seeking answers from their peers. They're seeking answers from people who they would think they could trust to provide the answers. And unfortunately, those persons sometimes turn around and take advantage. So as a government, as a society, we need to, I think, seek to provide those answers in responsible, age-appropriate ways to ensure that when it does come to parenthood, we are as best prepared and as best supported in that path.
Right? Oh, so quite a lot to take in. So we're just going to go to our second break. You are watching The Conversation. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the conversation. In this segment, we discuss matters of equal importance with government senator, opposition senator rather, Damion Crawford. Welcome to the conversation. That's one.
Thank you, man.
Two, how has it been? How has leadership, opposition, all of those things, how has it been?
Well, first of all, I hope when we're in government, I'm not still a senator, right? So I
Right.
want to be in the lower house.
But
But
you say that.
it's getting exciting because it's politics time. Whenever it gets to that period of decision making, the person entering upon the reference is in a heightened state of excitement, both thinking of what you will do, how you will do it, if you should get power, what would change, but also actively preparing for an election to convince the people, looking at polls, looking at numbers. And so it is not as calm as the first 2 years. It is now getting into excitement mode.
So you said that looking at numbers, looking at polls. Tell me where are we now, or what should we expect from the opposition now in terms of their preparedness? Are you closer to being fully prepared to mount a
Yes.
reasonable
It is
contest?
normal for the opposition to be more prepared than the government because the government has the opportunity to decide when the election is. So the opposition has a duty to be prepared because they can't predict. While most times in government, you wait for a signal from your leader to start getting prepared. So most times, even when they are in opposition, you'll find the opposition is more active and more prepared for an election before that period. So opposition might be prepared a year and a half, 2 years out, but the government will normally get an indication, hit the roads, and you get that from the Prime Minister, who have the authority to call the election. It's not the same with the US because everybody can know when the election is a set election
Greater
date.
level of
So
predictability.
is that predictability say, okay, 6 months before we get active. But because you don't have that predictability, you kind of use everything to judge, are they active? What are the periods saying? What should we expect? Since inflation is coming, would they try to beat inflation? With the illicit six, would they try to beat the illicit six? So the opposition have a need to be prepared due to their inability to predict.
Yeah. Well, there have been a whole heap of arguments now surrounding not just the illicit six, but generally now they're looking at the opposition's readiness, and they have been questioning the relevance of the leader, the current leader of the opposition, Mark Golding. What are your views of persons who will state that he's irrelevant or he's not the right fit for the party just now? So no issue with him per
Yes.
se, but in his role as party leader, no, it should have been somebody else.
Uneasy is the head that wears the crown. I've seen in my time every single leader be criticized. Even Portia Simpson was the most popular because they were questioning her competence. Peter Phillips, who was perceived competent, they were questioning his popularity. So Andrew Holness was challenged. Many people forget that Audley Shaw challenged Andrew Holness and made a statement that he's incapable to win. So the person who is in charge, because of the fortunes resting on the leader and the leadership, he will always be criticized. If I am lucky enough to get that position, people will also maybe say I can't raise enough money. People will find a reason to say that it should be someone else, it should not be you, especially if it isn't an automatic victory. So sometimes I think he's one of the hardest working leaders I've seen. He's always on the road. And I don't critique the customer. Pepsi can't go to the customer and say, oh, you should like my formula. You either change the formula or you go to the set of people who want that formula, and there might be enough that wants his operation.
Yeah, well, right now, it would appear, in spite of what you're saying, it would appear as though the People's National Party is not altogether united. It's not that cohesive front that we're used to the extent that we see persons defecting. That's the term that
Yes.
we could use. What are your views on that?
No,
What do you say
that's
to
a
persons?
norm within politics. It's a multiplicity of people who are not being paid. You're volunteering, so it's based on your opinions. Even they have highlighted 3 of our councillors, which should have been the lowest rank of representation for a political process. So you have the members of parliament, the councillors, the senators. We have gotten from them Dennis Meadows, who would have been a candidate multiple times, a deputy general secretary. We have gotten the person who was supposed to run against Lisa Hanna. So people are shifting between parties all the time. We just have not highlighted it to the same level that they have done at their conference.
So wouldn't a Venetia Phillips, her move, wouldn't that hurt the People's National
Of course,
Party?
because it's a numbers game. It would be stupid for any party to want to lose support. You want to gain support. I wouldn't mind if Andrew Holness was the only JLP when election come. So therefore, I want to gain more. I don't want to lose Carrie Douglas. I don't want to lose Venetia. I don't want to lose any member that currently supports us. I want to gain more members. And also, you'll find persons who have run elections before would have their own support, and maybe you lose some of that with them. So if we should lose Venetia, Venetia would have gained support of PMP members by running as a councillor, by running as an MP, and by extension, we might lose 15 or 20 or 500 with Venetia. So there's no joy in a party for losing support. But I'm saying it is not abnormal for that to happen. And as it relates to disagreement, don't always mean division. There's a division in opinions. But I don't know how many of us don't believe that Mark Golding would be a better Prime Minister than Andrew Holness.
So tell me about Southeast Sentan, troubled spot, Lisa going out.
Yes.
What can we expect?
They have a very good candidate there, a PhD doctor that will work with the World Bank. Is very interested in education. He actually was in charge of education policy. And that is a strong PMP center. We believe that the 14 that we got the last time would remain constant with us, and we're going after another 18 to get the 32. So what we're seeing, and it would be foolish in my opinion for the JLP where they are now to seek to gain 14 and not defend 49. So we think Southeast Sentan will be back in the PMP's column, stronger, and it will allow some of us to go and focus on some other areas.
Well, you definitely said it was a numbers game, and you brought up the 14. Now, how would you eat away? How could you eat away in such what seemed to be a short period of time, politically speaking? How could you eat away at what currently?
It's two things when you're in a race. One is the other person losing some, and one is you gaining some. So, 4x4, as fast as you are, if the person that get the button before you is equally fast, you will not catch you. So therefore, you must be running relatively faster than the person who's ahead of you. And so they will be losing some, which we think they have, and we would then have to gain some. I think that the last election, the numbers were a little bit skewed because places like Westmoreland, our support didn't show up to the polls. And we find that there is high excitement in that support. So we should be gaining back some of what used to be our very strong seats, Westmoreland, Central, Kingston. We should be gaining back those.
But we see Dr. Campbell heading out to Westmoreland, but it doesn't seem as though he's wanted there. Wouldn't you think that would stand in his way or in the way of the People's National Party?
In 2005, I was at a conference called Future Leaders Conference, and my roommate was a Haitian. I said to him, why do they hate Harry Steed? And he said, why you said that? I said, people demonstrating. He says, how much? 10,000? I said, no, maybe 2,000. He said, 11 million people live there. So the fact of the matter is that because 20 people come out and say, no, that will come on the news as a demonstration. You have 58,000 people on the list or 35,000 people on the list. So what we really need to look at is a poll of the seat and where he stands in that poll. Because there was persons with interest before, it has created some animosity and some tension. But I don't believe that the tension is sufficient for him to lose the seat, and it's a numbers game. So while it is that we're not happy that there is dissent, the dissent is not of the order for us to lose. The dissent is of the order for us to intervene.
So it's tolerable dissent.
It's need to intervene because I don't want to lose support, I don't want it to grow. But at the same time, you also understand that anywhere anyone goes, there will be a naysayer. For all of us, for Lisa, for me, for Dayton, for everybody.
So persons have questioned the selection process, and to the extent that persons have actually decided to leave or has gone to become independent.
Yes.
Could it be indicating a louder cry that something is definitely wrong with how we choose or how
I
we
thought it was
decide to
flawed
choose?
personally. I don't think polls should be used to decide upon a party's representative. The party should make an offer to the people and the people should decide to accept. The party should not go to the people to say who should we use when that person don't necessarily satisfy the party's intent and the party's direction. So if we say that we're a party for computers, but the public say they want a person who's a party for pen and paper, should we run to give the public that? Then there's no basis for ideology, there's no direction within the party. So I have never been in support of polls deciding who runs on behalf of the party.
So you're heading to St. Catherine.
Northwest,
This
yes.
is Hugh Graham's seat.
And Bobby Pickersgill originally.
And persons have argued, well, you have said it that persons are opposed to you going there. What are your
Not
views
many, no.
on not many?
But anybody goes to anywhere. But you have not seen an equal resistance, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Hugh Graham has said, you know, they want, so he's being forced out, or you're being forced out. Hugh Graham has said that.
He has said that.
Yeah.
There were issues with Hugh Graham for which didn't involve me. And before I entered upon the reference, because he was a friend of mine, and he is a friend of mine, I made sure I met with him to say, okay, this is where we are, quote unquote, you're being forced out. Being that you're being forced out, would you be okay if I come in? And he said yes. So that is how I entered upon the reference, because I would not have entered to help remove a friend. So it was at the point that it was then vacant that I expressed my interest, because he had some falling out with the leadership, yes.
Oh, so this is pointing to unity, at least within some ranks of the party then?
Yeah, man, as I said, if personally I have opinions that are not in total connection with anybody's in the party's opinion. But I believe that they're closer so we go to the restaurant, three of us, and you say, what you're drinking? You say orange juice, and I say pineapple juice. And then a person will say, I'm gonna drink rum. If we're all buying together, me and you have to come together because we prefer juice than alcohol. And that's what happens in a political party. Because we are a juice party and they're an alcohol party, we then, even though you say orange and I say pineapple, there's disagreement on which juice. But it's better we come together and either me take your orange or you take my pineapple, than we make him win with alcohol. So that is where we are. So a better example is a vegetarian, two vegetarians and a meat eater. And the meat man say, I want pork. And then the two vegetarians say, no man, it's one plate where I buy, and it should be one pizza. And it should be either pork or me want pineapple and you want olives. To we go fight out pork, so I better me take care of olives, or it's better me take care of pineapple. So that disagreement might be a quarrel among us, but it's not a disagreement sufficient for us not to support the party.
All right. So what I'm hearing now is that it's not as bad as
it's being portrayed.
Out there.
No. But every opposition seem. Remember, Christoph Tan said Andrew don't like bright people. We seem to have forgotten that.
Say that again for the record.
Yeah, Christoph Tan said Andrew don't like bright people. That is why he was at odds with Andrew Holness in the last election. Darrell Vaz was also on the other side. But once you're in power, the power of the Prime Minister allows everybody to behave themselves, because nobody wants to contest that power. It's awesome power. PJ had it for 18 years. So that is the reason.
So can Mark Golding give that assurance that everyone appears that way in the PNP?
Appears how?
In the same way that there's an appearance of unity in...
Once he has that power, because who's going to go against a man with such awesome power? You see, now that he doesn't have power, people might be willing to buck the system. But when you have that power, nobody challenges that power.
All right.
People fit in.
So with that, we go to our break. We're on a conversation with Damion Crawford, Senator Damion Crawford. We'll be right back. So welcome back to the conversation. So Senator, just segueing a little bit from what we were looking at.
Yes.
The opposition seemed to have some concerns about the government's amendments to many of the acts that have been there. Now, to the extent that we have opposition leader saying he's expressing concerns over the mandatory minimum sentences for murder, for firearm offences. Can you elaborate to an extent about the specific challenges that you might foresee, especially in light of the existing criticisms?
Well, what we have is a government without an idea what to do. And therefore, they're doing any and everything, throwing the kitchen sink. The worst thing for a government to do is nothing. You have to at least try something. And they are trying things that have been proven historically and in our context not to work. So, for example, the government is proposing a mandatory minimum sentence for murder in particular.
Yeah, and firearm offences.
So, and they presume that will help our crime situation. Good. Now, if it is that a person is being sentenced for murder, then the crime has already been committed. So, therefore, at this time, you're really punishing the criminal, but you're not fighting crime. because for a person to be at the part of being charged and being tried and now being sentenced, he have already committed a murder. So if our intent is to reduce murders, mandatory minimum in itself don't do that. Now, a person may argue that the harsher the punishment, it might serve as a deterrent because it creates risk to the action.
Yeah.
So a person said, okay, if my mother go beat me, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to beat my mother beat me hard. Right? Now, the only way that a harsh deterrent, which I call the severity of punishment, serves as a deterrent for an action is if it is co-joined with the swiftness of punishment and the surety of punishment. If there's no surety of punishment, the severity doesn't matter. If there's no swiftness of punishment, the severity is diluted. So therefore, when you say you're going to get 30 years, you have to look at the reality that, first of all, we have a clear-up rate of less than 60%. Let's say 50% clear-up rate. Clear-up rate means the police have found enough reason to lay a charge. Addition to that, we have a conviction rate of less than 30%. It means, therefore, that of all the murders that we have in Jamaica, less than 15 to 20% are charged, 80% are not. That means there's no surety of punishment. So the severity is of no moment.
So you're saying then Jamaica's system, the judiciary and the penal system, is not mature enough to live up to these expectations that are being
not just to live up, to create that correlation, that causal effect of risk being a reason. Because the risk is not just the severity. So if you said to me, all right, Mr. Crawford, let us bet $1 million and you can win $500 million. Now, the risk to me is losing my $1 million. If I have 10 chances, I might try. Because the risk is not, the surety of losing is reduced. You understand? Yeah. So when you don't have the surety of punishment, you don't have the swiftness of punishment, you cannot have a deterrent with just the severity. And so that is a problem. Now, the Chief Justice himself has said that it has reduced the level of persons willing to plea, which was a way to clear up some of these cases by saying, okay, I'll give you 15 years if you plea, or I'll give you 10 years. But it also have created the inability for circumstance to be considered. So let's look at the firearm, for example, automatic 15 years. There is a goat farmer who was robbed and shot, left for dead in the bushes. Fortunately, he was discovered, he went to the hospital, got recovered, get back some goats. He cannot get a licensed firearm because licensed firearms in Jamaica is based on income. A man can get a firearm to protect his wholesale, but he can't get one to protect his daughter if he don't have a wholesale. So if his income is not sufficient, he can't get a firearm. He then takes an illegal firearm. No intent to murder or whatever. It's for protection, having gone through this negative as a goat man. And he don't know nothing else. He was, I think he was 50-odd years old. Yeah. The police catch him with this illegal firearm. There's no news from the community. There's nothing that he was robbing people, that he was doing nothing than trying to protect himself. Should the judge have an ability to say, okay, you had an illegal firearm, it deserves punishment, but it's not 15 years based on the fact that you're not equal to a man that you robbed 10 places with his illegal firearm? The minimum takes away that opportunity.
So you're saying there, it diminishes the latitude to exercise discretion?
Yes.
Wow.
And all circumstances and all people are not the same. So what I'm saying is, I am willing to do anything that carries down this murder. I'm just not willing to do anything when it don't carry down this murder, like state of emergency and the other things that have not. So I'm not in agreement with things that have proven not to work.
But then the opposition has compromised and they have asked for 40 years. My question now is how different
I can
is
only
40
speak to
to
myself.
50?
I don't agree with none of them. So,
So Daniel Scott Matley, Senator Scott Matley has asked for 40 years.
That's what I'm saying, that we all don't have the same opinion.
So you don't agree with
No,
that?
because it still comes back to surety and swiftness. So, for example, let's look at St. James. St. James need 14 more police cars to properly police. That will assist with surety and swiftness because it can respond quickly, it will assist with prevention. It needs 2 buses for the crime scene preparation. It don't have none of those. Need 14 more cars. I think it only have 10 currently. You have many places with 1 car that is down. So those are things that we need to do prior to going into 30, 40, 10, 15, because don't matter what it is. We're going into a year now since they gone automatic 15 years. Has it deterred people from taking guns? Has it deterred people from having interest in guns? It hasn't even reduced the videos of themselves with guns. So therefore, the natural assumption that risk to a man who don't care if he dies, a man who don't care if he's in prison, a man who drink and forget and smoke and collect, that 30 years don't mean nothing to him.
So we know that you spoke about the numbers, we know that you spoke about swiftness, but would you be able to say, based on your own observation, that the police force has improved in terms of conviction rates, in terms of assessing crimes, and all of that, based on the fact that they have now been able to dismantle more gangs faster?
Well, the last report that I got was that we had the same amount of gangs that he said we had about 10 years ago. So I don't know how many gangs have been dismantled. You tell
so
me
what about the
gangs
one gang trial
the trial is gone. It's going on. But has the gang been dismantled?
No, but they have been sentenced, haven't they?
But has the gang been dismantled? Because what you have in our society, and we can use downtown as an example, with the removal of Dodo Spring, about 6 other groups that decided that they were running the place. So it's a simple reality. If you're going to fight criminals, punishment is the answer. If you're going to fight crime, there are other interventions that you must take. For example, you must remove the crime of need. The crime of need is to make sure that we're all insured with a national insurance, so a man not have to rob for buying picnic or mother medicine. You should give 1 meal a day in school, so a man not have to rob for feed. So you take away the crime of need. Therefore, you only have that segment who is greedy. You then go after those people who are greedy, in my opinion, with an enemy of the state bill. That is what I believe can help our situation. An enemy of the state bill is where the police is going in front of 3 judges to indicate that John Brown is a chief crime producer based on disinformation. If the 3 judges, 2 of them are in agreement, then John Brown is treated as an enemy of the state. The Minister of Security said he believes we have 400 serious crime producers. What we're doing with these things is targeting 3 million to catch 400, instead of naming these 400 as enemies of the state, as terrorists within the state, and treating them as such. Different types of trial, no bail, all of those things. What we're doing instead is to make a youth like Mario Dean go to jail and come out dead, because the police can wantonly arrest whoever they want who is not one of the 400. Or he goes into jail, have to link up with one of the 400 for protection, and come out now a part of the gang. All of that don't make sense. So while it is that we are satisfied, say, yeah, kill them, punish them, shut them, do whatever we need to do because we are scared, the reality is that the numbers show that it's unlikely to work. And whatever you show that is unlikely to work leaves the problem as is. So
we need to be more specific, be more deliberate, more spearfishing as opposed to casting a wide net.
Yes.
All right, so impact on accused persons and trial rates and all of that. It was mentioned that implementing mandatory minimum sentences may undermine the options for accused persons to get well, you're going to say that.
Yes.
So how do you now anticipate that this change influenced or hasn't influenced the behavior of accused individuals?
The Chief Justice said it.
So
he said that the mandatory minimum for the guns have caused for less persons willing to take a plea, tying up the courts. But also, we have... let me just...
Dr. Chana said that he's going to modify that.
He is going to modify this bill just come 1 year ago. It should have been considered. We were saying that in Parliament. So yes, and not only reactive, stupid. Because when you come with a thing that unthought out, this is proof to the public that they're not thinking. You understand? Because this was clear as day that if I am faced with a sure 15 years, I'm going to try with the jury. If I'm faced with a sure 15 years, I'm going to say it in the dark. But it also may lead to the jury acting in a different way. Because when a youth at 17 or 18 is in front of me for 40 years or 30 years or 50 years, which is a mandatory for murder, and you're going to tell me that the place the dark, I'm not sure I'm guilty.
So tell me, so your proposition or the proposal that you just put forward, it sounds reasonable. Do you think that there is not enough bipartisan consensus on crime management and all of those?
Bipartisan is a thing that is not very easy to achieve, because we have innate differences in opinions. For example, one man might think people are innately good and one man might think people are innately bad. You're going to have a difference in approach.
Yeah, sure, it's not a case whereby we politicize too much?
No, politicizing is saying if the PMP wins, you will die. That was what Andrew Holness was saying. Or you can sleep with the windows and doors open. So politicizing is using it for political gain. But there's a natural necessity of debate on opinions between two political parties. So, for example, I don't believe that a mandatory minimum is the answer. And they might believe it is the answer. Now, if the two of us are at that point, where do we meet in the middle? There's no middle ground between slavery and freedom.
So what do you believe is the answer?
I believe that the answer is an enemy of the state bill. Because if I can ask some simple questions for purpose of mathematics, are our prisons currently overcrowded? The answer is yes. Is the current time spent by a person in prison less than the mandatory minimum? The answer is yes. If you increase this mandatory minimum, would the prisons therefore not be even more overcrowded? Then what is the plan for that?
So you're saying that the government is stupid, have been reactive, they're not thorough enough in terms of the investigation, and so they're without a plan.
A government must come to the people and say, all right, we're going to reduce crime by 5% every year for the next 10 years. So we can
overcrowding is not new though, you know.
But you're exaggerating the problem of overcrowding by putting in a mandatory minimum. That is something where the jury is going to consider, the judge, I mean, in your prison sentence. To say first time offense, all right, and you had the gun, it never have no bullet, all right, and then he give you 5 years. Knowing that the prison overcrowded. Now you're saying to no, him have to be 15. Oh, I went to court for a student at the University of the West Indies, gun court. When the police had a cordon, they gave him a gun to carry in his bag. He was a student in marketing. They found it in his bag and charged him for possession of a firearm. I went to give character evidence. Should that person receive 15 years?
You tell me.
Is it the same as a person who take $40 million or $40,000 for come and say, you name Damion Crawford and shoot after you? The current proposal is that those two people are the same. And the person that watching this and say, him shouldn't take the gun. You never lived in a ghetto before.
So this law is potentially, or these amendments are potentially causing more shackles than liberty.
Yes, and not only and not solving the problem. If it was solving the problem, he give up some liberty. Mm-hmm. But if it's not solving the problem, then you're basically saying I should pay for something that I will not receive. That don't make any sense to me.
All right. So thank you very much for that aspect of the discussion. You know, we told you that we had to get back to somewhere else. Do you think the PNP will win the next upcoming election?
I do. Yes.
All right.
We definitely have a better chance.
So let me pull out the optimism out of it. Will they win?
You can't say that because another man is in and he's a favorite, having 49 seats. You're coming from 14 to get to 32. So he's in defense of about 49, 17, and you're seeking 18. So it's a difficult thing for us to jump up and say it will. But the numbers that I've seen, the energy that I've seen, when I watched the JLP's conference, I expected a bigger conference. It was a big conference, but in an election year, I expected a bigger conference, and I expected more energy.
All right, so tell me the seats that you think that the JLP will lose to the PNP.
I think all of Westmoreland is coming back for sure.
All of Westmoreland? Yeah. Anything else?
The safe seats, Central Kingston is coming back for sure. I think that we're going to get 1 or 2 in Hanover. I'm very confident of that. I think South Manchester is going to be right back in the PNP's coffers. So those are some seats that I have. Central Manchester as well is going to be...
but Rhoda is doing a good job.
No, Rhoda is doing a good marketing opportunity. But
so she's not doing a good job?
She's doing a fair job, and she's a Crawford, so me still have to give her props. But I don't want to criticize
isn't
the
going
person.
back, you know.
No,
so
but
wouldn't that be an indication that she's doing a good job?
All right. It's difficult for me to say she's doing a good job because I don't have full information. I know that she's promoting quite a bit of activities, that she has paid the road, I give away some tanks, etc. Those are not things that I personally perceive to be a reasonable measure.
What would be a reasonable measure?
Like your education programs. Are you improving literacy on general? Do you have programs that the people in the community can take ownership of income and skills and stuff like that? And she may have them. I don't have the full information. But I'm using more the historical voting patterns and the reality that we don't shift voting patterns very easily within our society.
So
I'm
49-14.
critiquing her. I'm just saying that those patterns may come back.
49-14. Where do you see it going in 2025?
I think election will be before 2025, first of all. I am watching to see if they're going to call a general before a local government.
And what will be the outcome?
I think that we will win. I can't say 38, 35, whatever. I'm not in the center of the PMP's decision making. I'm just looking at the anecdotal things of the energy of the PMP versus the energy of the JLP, the warnings of further price increases in food. That's going to create a strain. The way people respond to the leader, Andrew Holness, on the internet, who was their trump card. So they have lost their trump card. Those anecdotal things are what I'm using to say they will lose. And then they're failing so badly with crime and education and health.
Oh. All right, it's quite a conversation, Senator Crawford. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Yes,
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This has been the conversation. I am Kwame Thomas. Take care.